Well, this past weekend, Donna and the kids and I went back to Texas to see some old friends. Old friends in the sense that we've known them for a long time and that they're also not getting any younger. They've got grown children and such. But we had an awesome time. Our kids got to swim in swimming pools. They, at one point, were eating chocolate fondue while in the jacuzzi. I'm like, what is this, the 70s? Like, what are you doing? They had such a blast, but it was fascinating. They had a great time when we were talking about really what they enjoyed. Sitting around and eating meals with some of those friends were some of their favorite moments. A couple of the friends bought puzzles and games and toys from a dollar store and just gathered around and doing puzzles and playing games with some people that were sitting and asking them questions about their life and genuinely interested in the answers was thrilling to our kids. And I remember at one point, it was about bedtime and we were all sitting around, these friends of ours and our kids, and we were talking about what we appreciate about each other. And they were talking about how they told jokes together and laughed and played games and asked questions. Then we said what we really like about each other, talked about our favorite moment from the day. And I'll never forget, my son was kind of snuggled up in a chair with me and he goes, "Dad, I know my epic best moment of today." And I was like, "What is it, son?" He goes, "The moment I walked through that door." I'm like, "Well, that's sweet." He didn't know how to say it, but he's just saying, I entered into this realm where I believe people really care about me. And he said, so my best moment, the epic best, was just being in this world. And as we were driving away and going to the airport, I remember my daughter, she was buckling into the car. She was like, "Dad, I don't want this to disappoint you, but this was better than Disneyland." And I was like, "Doesn't disappoint me at all. This was way cheaper." But what they were trying to express in their own childlike way is there's something deeply soul-satisfying about being around friends. Now, C.S. Lewis said it a different way in a letter to Arthur Greeves. He said, "Friendship is the greatest of all worldly goods. Certainly to me, it is the chief happiness of life. If I had to give a piece of advice to a young man about a place to live, I think I should say, sacrifice almost everything to live where you can be near your friends." He wrote in another letter, "Is any pleasure on earth as great as a circle of Christian friends around a fire?" He said, "I can't think of anything better." I went to visit some of my dad's old buddies and we sat around a fire and visited all day long. I'm like, you guys just hang. And it was amazing that these decades have gone by, they still have things they can talk about, share about, laugh about. And what was fascinating was leaving that moment, how much they talked about gratitude, not just for each other, but gratitude for this, that I get to be a part of something like this, a circle of friends. In the New Testament, the word for friend is the word philos. It's built off the phil stem that can mean beloved or loved. Philadelphia is brotherly love, right? And it can mean someone that you have affection for or trust for. It really kind of means belong to. There's a synonym to idio, which means my own. That to consider someone a friend is you're one of mine. You're one of my people, right? We want that. We all want a group of people that considers you one of mine, and I consider you one of mine. Everyone wants to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see that our troubles are all the same. You want to go where everyone knows your name, right? We're like that. The Greeks considered friendship the highest of all loves, right? And yet we don't talk about it much today. We tend in popular culture to talk more about erotic love. And yet you don't have to look too far under the surface to realize we want friends. You could even argue the most epic stories we tell each other these days that we pay money to see, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, every single Marvel movie, from the Guardians of the Galaxy to Avengers, they're all, in one sense, a celebration of friendship. It's why a generation of us was glued to that TV series, Band of Brothers, about World War II. It's because we watched that and said, we want a band of brothers like that. People we know will care about us. Sebastian Junger has written and spoken often a great deal about in these modern times, young men coming back from battle miss combat. And he says they don't miss the death. They don't miss explosions. They hate war. But what happened was that crisis forged a bond of brotherhood that was so intensely satisfying that when they came back to the States, it was almost unbearable to be without it. And yet it's worth noting that friendship can be good or bad. I mean, if you look through the Bible, some bad guys have friends, and some group of friends can get together and do some pretty bad things. So we're talking about friendship and the beauty of it and the fact that we want it, but we need to look at not just the concept of friendship, but how to do friendship right, how to do it the way God intended. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Here's what I want to do. The tragedy is I'm talking about friendship, and I can feel from some of you, you're like, yeah, I want that. I need that. Yes. But the difficulty is, as much as we long for it, increasingly we're having trouble figuring out how to do it. So what I want to do in this series, today we're just going to establish some basic principles, and then we'll get into some specifics next week. But today I want to look at the state of friendship in the States, and then I want to look at the standard of true friendship, and then I want to look at the source of deep friendship, right? The state of friendship, and then we're going to clear the rubble and get a foundation for lasting friendships and some scaffolding, right? The source and the structure. Got it? Makes sense? So let's start with the state of our unions. Let's talk about friendship in America, folks. How do you think we're doing? Couple different things. I'll quote this. The Survey Center on American Life published an article on the state of American friendships based on their findings of survey of 18 and up in America from all 50 states and DC. I always think it's nice when they throw that in. And this is how they started it. The financial devastation wrought by the COVID-19 pandemic has been well documented, but less widely reported is the emotional toll many Americans faced as a result of quarantine requirements and self-imposed social isolation. Nearly half of Americans report having lost touch with at least a few friends over the past 12 months. Nearly 1 in 10 Americans report having lost touch with most of their friends. That's sad. Young women appear to be more affected than most were. Nearly 6 in 10 reported having 6 in 10. Why would you not reduce that? Does that make you crazy? I'm just reading this and I'm like, didn't you go to math class? 6 in 10? Nearly 3 out of 5, I don't know, young women report having lost touch with at least few friends. And 16%, they are no longer in regular contact with most of their friends. That is really tough. But what the pandemic did is it's kind of escalated a trend that's been going on for a while. The same study was talking about multiple aspects of friendships. One is the number of close friends. And Americans have been declining considerably in their number of close friends over the past several decades. So in the 1990s, the percentage of people who had 3 or fewer close friends was 27%. So about 1 out of 4 Americans had 3 or less friends. In 2021, 50%. That's gone up quite a bit. When asked how many friends you have, 3 or less. When asked if you have 10 or more close friends in the 90s, 33%, 1 out of 3 people said, yeah, I have 10 or more close friends. Now 13% say they have 10 or more. That's a huge shift. And then this is the one that really is sad. No close friends. In the 1990s, 3% of the population in the survey said, I have no close friends. In 2021, 12%. That's a little over 1 in 10. So think about this room and saying 1 out of 10 people in here might say, I don't have any close friends. Types of American friendships. Most Americans have situation or activity-based friendships. That shouldn't shock you. Situation-based means I met them at work, I meet them at the gym, I kind of see them at school, or there's an activity. Yeah, we're in this soccer deal, we have these same hobbies, that sort of thing. 40% of Americans have an online friend only. 2 in 3 have childhood friends. But I found this interesting. Black Americans have more childhood friends. Again, 8 in 10. Come on, report having 4 out of 5 Black Americans report having a friend they've known since childhood. These type of friendships are significantly less common among white and Hispanic Americans. So white and Hispanic brothers and sisters, you have significantly less day ones than our black brothers and sisters. I don't know why, all right? Feel free to discuss it over lunch. I'm gonna leave it there. Gender and friendships, I found this fascinating. When asked, did you have a private conversation with a friend during which you shared your personal feelings in the last week? Half of women said yes. 1 out of 3 men said yes. Did you receive emotional support from a friend this past week? 40% of women said yes. 20% of men said yes. Did you tell a friend you loved them this week? Half of women said yes. 1 in 4 men said yes. Friendship and politics. This should be fun. Only 1 in 5 Americans say they discuss political issues at least a few times a week. That's probably not true here. Some of you are like, that's not right. Yeah, we're the outlier, I'm sure. Among Republicans, 11% have no Democrat friends. That's 1 in 10. Uh-oh, okay. There's a story there. So among Republicans, 11% have no Democrat friends. Among Democrats, 29% have no Republican friends. So there's a sprinkling of Democrats that got a lot of Republican friends, apparently, or a lot of Republicans think you're their friend. No group is more likely to end a friendship over politics than liberal women. 33% said they stopped being friends with someone because of politics. Yeah, I'm going to leave that right there. Again, you can discuss that one at lunch. I'm going to move on to something less controversial. Let's talk about religion. Friendship and religion, this is interesting, folks, and I'm almost done with stats. 23% of Americans who attend religious services multiple times a week report they're lonely once in a while. So basically 1 out of 4 that come to Sunday and community group, 1 out of 4. So when you're here right now, count 1 out of 4. When you're at community group, 1 out of 4 say I'm lonely. If you attend only once a week, that means you only come here, it's 1 out of 3. Again, just kind of think about those numbers in this room, that 1 out of 3 of us, and I'm not gonna make you raise your hand, but could say, yeah, I feel lonely here, right? If you never attend church, then you're not here. But unless you're visiting, which I'm so glad you are, 50% of people who say, I never attend church, report feeling lonely. So if you never attend, you're significantly more likely to be lonely than those who do. They isolated 4 main factors, 2 different surveys, of what contributes to our state of loneliness and friendlessness in America today. And they said geographic mobility, that is moving for work, not attending religious gatherings, not married, because married couples tend to seek out other married couples, and long hours on social media or online. So if you moved for work, aren't married, don't attend church, and spend a lot of time online, you're probably lonely. So that's a good chunk of our town, right? Jean Twenge is a professor of psychology at San Diego State University, and she reported that from 2000 to 2015, the number of high school students who get together daily with their friends dropped 40%. 40%. I put a lot of that at the feet of social media. I mean, think about it. Before we had these, what did you do at the doctor's office? After you flipped through all the old magazines, you were like, so what are you in for, right? And you just were forced to make a friend. Now we're often in the same room and we are alone together. Right? Now, so that's the sad part. Now, what do? You're like, okay, Ben, turn the corner. I don't even know what a friend is anymore. Someone to tell me how. And what's fascinating is we're going to turn here to Jesus. Jesus, this conversation we jump right into the middle of, is him sitting with his 12 disciples, his inner ring. And it's the last long conversation he's going to have with them before he goes to be crucified. And there's some key things he wants to communicate to them. And one of them is he tells them, I want you to know you're my friends. And he starts to use that language. And in doing so, he sort of defines the standard of real true and abiding friendship, and then the source of true and abiding friendship. Now, what I'm not saying here is that you can't be friends with someone if you're not a Christian. Friendship is a gift. God's given all of humanity, right? And yet our friendships are always built on something. And many of you know that. You had friendship that was built on your sports activities in high school. And when the activity went away, so did most of the friends. Or your friendship was built on some like of some TV show. And when the TV show ran out, you didn't know what to talk about with this person anymore. A lot of our friendships are built on something. And when the something goes, often so does the friendship. What if you could build your friendship on a something that never goes, that's eternal? Then you got something solid. And so again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but let's talk about the standard that Jesus sets, and then we'll talk about the source of true and deep friendships. Standard you see in John 15:12. He says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So there it is. He points at his love and says, this is the standard of love and the source of it. He says, I want you to love each other and use me as an example. So what's the standard of a true friend? He's going to show it in himself. And he's going to say not only that, he said earlier in the conversation, this is the hallmark of the people of Jesus. He said it in John 13:34, a new commandment I give you, love one another just as I've loved you. You also are to love one another. That's the new command. Love each other to the same degree that I love you. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. The distinguishing hallmark of the people of Jesus is this type of love we have for each other. He's about to explain. What does it look like? He gives us two standards of true friendship. He says in the next verse, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. Now that operates at two levels. He's presenting the standard, but he's also hinting at this is what I'm about to do for you. Now they don't fully understand that, which is why he says later in the conversation, the Holy Spirit will remind you about this later. And we know that was successful because in 1 John chapter 3, verse 16, it says, by this we know love. He laid down his life for us. And so we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. John got the point later. What he did for me was he laid his life down for me. And so that's the standard. So we ought to lay our lives down for our brothers. So the first standard of a true friend is love sacrifices for the other. I disadvantage me for your advantage. I remember Tommy Nelson, this preacher I listened to growing up, used to say this, that a buddy would always say to him as they were leaving, hey, if I got $1, you got $1. Which was a way of saying, there's no separation between you and me. That whatever resources I have, they are immediately at your disposal. That's a true friend. And the truest of friends don't even have to say it. You just know it. I know for me, when my dad's health was failing, I went to go try to help him clean his house, organize some things, try to get things in order. And one of my friends was like, well, I'll see you there. I'm like, well, of course he will. And he showed up and helped me. And when my father passed, I remember organizing the funeral with my siblings. And of course, siblings are going to organize the funeral. And then I showed up and there were all my dad's friends there and family members. And then 3 of my college buddies. They knew my dad. They loved my dad. But I didn't necessarily expect my college friends would attend. This was not a town near their town. Some of them had to get on flights. But as they walked through the back door, I was so grateful. And then I realized, but you know what? I'm not surprised. This makes sense because you're my friend. And a friend disadvantages themselves for your advantage. I'll take a loss so you win. I'll go without so you can go with. That's what a friend does. I lay down my life for you. And Jesus says there's no greater love than that. Now he's not contrasting it against love for your enemies. I mean, Jesus obviously loves his enemies, loved his enemies, gave his life for them, called him to do the same. But you got to picture again here, he's sitting around with his closest buddies and said, let me tell you what real friendship looks like. It's laying down our lives for each other. That I put my life at your disposal so you can be what you're meant to be. I was back at Texas A&M this week, my old alma mater, preaching at Breakaway. And while I was there, obviously I walked right past the Memorial Student Center. It's called the Memorial Student Center because all through it are, I don't know what you call them. They're not monuments, but these plaques is too small. These I can't think of the word. Pictures. Things, they're not busts. Forget it. Well, let's move on. You get the idea. There's all through this Memorial Student Center are memorials. There it is. To men that had received the Medal of Honor, the highest honor our nation can bestow on someone. The last person to get it is depicted there is Clarence Sasser. He served as a combat medic during Vietnam. And his company was tasked with a reconnaissance mission. And upon arrival, they took heavy fire from fixed positions around their landing zone. And during the first few minutes, there were over 30 casualties. And this is what it reads. As you walk by, you can read his story. It says, without hesitation, Sasser ran across an open rice paddy through a hail of fire to assist the wounded. And after helping one man to safety, he was painfully wounded in his left shoulders by a fragment of an exploding rocket. Refusing medical attention, he ran through a barrage of rocket and automatic weapons fire to aid casualties of the initial attack, and after giving them urgent needed treatment, continued to search for other wounded. Despite 2 additional wounds immobilizing his legs, he dragged himself through the mud towards another soldier 100 meters away. And although in agonizing pain and faint from loss of blood, Sasser reached the man, treated him, and proceeded to encourage another group of soldiers to crawl 200 meters to relative safety. He then attended to their wounds for 5 hours until they were evacuated. And he's alive today, and you can watch his interview about it, and he says, my job was to care for those boys. He said, so I was just doing my job. But he says it with tears in his eyes. I was there to care for them. And so it didn't even cross his mind to not disadvantage himself for their advantage. And when you read that, when you hear about that, you go, that is so powerful. There's nothing we can honor more than that as a people, than to say you were willing to take pain so I could win, so I could live, so I could flourish. That's the standard of a good friend. And if you can't think of anyone you're willing to disadvantage yourself for, you may not yet be a good friend. That's something to think about. Who would I go without lunch for? Who would I give money without hesitating? Who would I serve before they ever asked me because I just knew there was a need? That's what a good friend does. And Jesus continues, you're my friend if you do what I command, which sounds confusing. Let's just be honest. Like if my kids had another kid say that to them at the playground, you're my friend if you do what I command, I would tell them, don't be friends with that kid. So how do we understand this? Why is it okay for Jesus to say it, not for some random kids? Well, it's important to note, Jesus is not dangling his friendship out there like a carrot, saying, you can be my friend if you do this. He's saying, no, I already went first. Before this, he was washing their feet like a servant. He was like, I am your friend. That's already decided. And I'm laying down my life for you. So into the friendship circle, I'm already there. You'll be mine if you do what I command. And what's his command? Love each other as much as I love you. So it's not this oppressive command. He's saying, any affection you have for me, I want you to spread among each other. That's what I'm asking for. It's not oppressive, it's heroic and liberating, right? What else I think is happening here is Jesus realizes he can't abandon his central identity. He is the Lord. You don't get to set that aside. So he's not setting aside his lordship to be their friend. He's realizing, hey, I'm always the commander of this outfit. What I'm saying is I don't want to just be commander of this outfit. There's a great movie, Master and Commander, which I'm quoting a surprising amount these days. But Russell Crowe is the commander of a ship, and he can't not be that. And yet he invites the medic into his quarters to be his friend. But even as their friends, whenever it gets to a discussion of decisions, he realizes, no, but I have to lead and be the decision maker. I don't get to set that aside. And so here Jesus is saying, hey, I'm still the commander, so I am commanding you. And yet it's interesting, then you go, well, then what does that mean? Because he says, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. And you're like, wait a minute, for me, you're my friends, you're not my servant, because you're doing what I command you to do. To me, doing what I command you to do is the definition of a servant, not a friend. So what are we talking about? And Jesus explains it in the next verse. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master's doing. But I've called you friends, for all that I heard from my Father I've made known to you. That's interesting. What he points out about a servant is he says the servant doesn't get to hear his master's thinking. He just gets to hear, go do that, and you do it. He says, what I'm doing is I'm letting you into my counsel. I didn't just tell you as God, as your Lord, go do that. I could. He said, but I'm stepping in as a friend and doing what? This is the second standard of a friend. A friend doesn't just sacrifice for you. A friend invites you in to their thinking and their feelings. It doesn't just sacrifice, it shares your innermost self. He said, I didn't want to just command you guys. I wanted to share with you the thoughts and the heart of my Father and of me. I'm inviting you into my secret counsel. That's a good friend. For me, my sister and I were always related. We're always brother and sister, and I always loved her, but we became friends in college. We decided to run a marathon together. And so that means we spent hours together every day running. And you got to do something, so we would talk. And I noticed after a while, I would just talk and talk because we're running forever. And I would explain what was going on in my head, in my heart. Even when it wasn't fully articulated yet. Even when I said it wrong, she knew my heart's intent. Or even when I said something out loud and was like, no, I don't actually mean that. What I mean is, as I would process, she would want to understand not just the words, but the intent, not just what I was saying, but my heart. And I realized, wow, you really care about what I'm saying. I feel such freedom in the midst of this care to share with you my innermost thoughts and feelings. So we're not just transactionally happen to both be running along this road. As we run along, we are sharing the deepest parts of ourselves. That's what a friend does. I'm taking the armor off, and I'm letting you in. And what's fascinating about that, there's much more we can say about how to be a friend. Some of you are like, Ben, you haven't told me how to find some friends around here. I don't know anybody in this town. That's next week, all right? Again, I told you, we're gonna leave you hanging a bit. That's why it's a series, folks. But the standard Jesus sets is I sacrifice my life for you, and I share my innermost thoughts with you. That's a dear friend. But what's fascinating, and where I want to land this is before we get a friendship with each other that does that, I want you to notice what he's offering here. He's saying you have that availability with God. So you might leave this room today and you go, well, I still don't have any friends. I mean, I nodded at more people than I usually do. We said hi to a couple people, made some awkward eye contact, but I wouldn't say I walked out here with some friends. Well, we're working on that this week. Come to community group, after parties, all this stuff that Jacob mentioned. But what I'm telling you here is before any of this, there's this opportunity to be a friend of God's. And that's what's powerful about this. Because God and the Son of God, Jesus Christ's friendship, isn't just the standard of how we're meant to be friends with each other. It is the source of true friendship with each other. He says in verse 16, you didn't choose me, I chose you. And I appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask my Father in my name, he may give it to you. He says, to be clear, you didn't earn this kind of relationship with me. I set it on the table, so no one's arrogant here like, well, I found my way into God's counsel. He's like, no. I went and found you, and I appointed you. It's the same word as set aside or lay down of his life, same word in Greek. I laid down my life for you, and I laid aside your life for a purpose, that you would know me, and that as you're connected with me, you'd become a community that bears fruit. And it's interesting, we didn't read it, but right above this in the conversation, he's using this imagery of I'm a vine, you're the branches. When you're connected to me, you will bear fruit. And so he says, abide in my love, and you'll love each other. So my love isn't just the standard, sacrifice like I did. His love is the source, love like I did. How? By coming to my love first. By receiving from me first, by you drinking in deep of what I provide, because we need that. Because like I said earlier, friendships are all built on something, right? They all have a source. And if your source is just activities, that's not a bad way to start friendships, but it's got to be rooted in something deeper. But if you're just saying, I need a friend, that's not a good recipe for building friendships. C.S. Lewis says it very starkly in The Four Loves, which if you've never read, it's the one book that he recorded as an audiobook. If you ever wondered what C.S. Lewis sounds like, you can get the audiobook. The way he says agape is hilarious. He says, friendship arises out of mere companionship when two or more of the companions discover they have in common some insight or interest or even taste which others do not share, and which till that moment each believed to be his own unique treasure or burden. The typical expression of opening friendship would be something like, what? You too? I thought I was the only one. Hence we picture lovers face to face, but friends side by side. Their eyes look ahead. This is why those pathetic people, his words, this is why those pathetic people who simply want friends can never make any. The very condition of having friends is that we should want something else beside friends. Or the truthful answer to the question, do you see the same truth, would be, I see nothing and don't care about the truth. I only want a friend. No friendship can arise, though affections, of course, may. There would be nothing for the friendship to be about, and friendship must be about something, even if we're only an enthusiasm for dominoes or white mice. Those who have nothing can share nothing. Those who go nowhere have no fellow travelers. You will not find the warrior, the poet, the philosopher, or the Christian by staring in his eyes as if he were your mistress. Better fight beside him, read with him, argue with him, pray with him. Henry Nouwen said it this way. He said, if we do not know we're the beloved sons and daughters of God, we're going to expect someone in the community to make us feel that way, and they can't. We'll expect someone to give us that perfect unconditional love. But community is not loneliness grabbing onto loneliness. I'm so lonely and you're so lonely. It's solitude grabbing onto solitude. I'm the beloved. You're the beloved. Together, we can build a home. That's the importance of friendship. Is to say it's got to be about something. But if it's just about our loneliness and our ache, we'll try to use each other to be something for each other we can't be. And that's where you get manipulative relationships. That's where you get draining relationships. I come to you as an empty hole and I need you to fill it. Well, I'm an empty hole, and you rip each other apart. It can become evil and manipulative. Or if you're not careful, friendships can be about something really sinister and can become bad. Herod and Pilate became friends over the crucifixion of Jesus, and that's not a thing to be celebrated. So friendship can be about some dark things. Or friendship that's two empty holes looking to be filled can become manipulative and become a bad thing. So friendship isn't necessarily good. But where it is good is when it's rooted in the right source. You come to the ultimate friend, the one who says, you don't have in you the resources you need to love each other well, but I love you. You come to me and let me sacrifice for you. Let me share with you. And let me change you. That's the beauty of Jesus' love for us. He says, I'm going to speak to you my innermost thoughts. That's what we have available in his word. We have available the mind of Christ. He says, and I'm going to sacrifice to you. Greater love has no man than this, that he lays down his life for his friends. Watch me do that. And as I speak to you, and as I sacrifice to you, he says, it begins to change you. If you put your faith in me, you become like a little branch that's connected to a vine, and the nutrients of my sacrificial love change you. You no longer become a drain, you become a fountain. You no longer become someone looking for love. You have someone who has it in them like an overflowing well that can pour into other people. And when you get a community that knows I'm beloved and you're beloved, I'm the loved and you're the loved, then we can share that love for each other, and we go from strength to strength to strength. And that's what Jesus says. As I loved you, love each other. Start with mine as the source. My truth, my thoughts, my sacrifice, my life. Build your life on that, and you have a common ground that will never fade. And so, friend, I don't know today what you're building your life on, but Jesus Christ is offering himself as the source of true friendship. You may not have a lot of friends in this town, but you can walk out of here saying, but I have a friend in God, and there's no greater friend. And when you do that, you will find, like a little branch abiding in the vine, you have the resources to care for others. And in that case, you become a great candidate for a friend. And when you walk into a room like this and say, my common interest is a God who loved me, and someone else says, that's mine too, you're gonna build a friendship. I remember the first time I walked into a room like this by myself, the first time I had ever moved to a new town on my own. I was an introvert, hated being in rooms like this. And I did what a lot of people do, maybe some of you are doing. I sat as far in the back as I could, and I said, no one's saying hi to me. It's Christians, so fake. And I remember in that moment, right as I was judging and condemning a large swath of human beings I'd never met, God was like, Ben, do you know me? Yes, Lord. You know that I love you. He's like, all right, then you're a part of this. And so I love you. And why don't you take some of that and just share it with some other people? So I looked around the room, and there was a dude growing out a mustache that was, was kind of working in the back, sitting by himself though. And I was like, I think that's my guy. So I just walked up to him and started visiting with him. Realized he was there because he was kind of like this girl, and she had invited him. Worked out, they got married, have wonderful children. And he became a very dear friend, and continues to be until this day. And I can't tell you how many times at random moments Donna and I get texts from he and his wife to strengthen our hand in God as we lead this church. And I go, man, I would not have had a basis that strong with him, and I wouldn't have had a resource to offer him if not for the inexhaustible love and the common interest of commitment to Jesus Christ that we share. And I want that for you. John got the message. So in 1 John 4, he says, beloved, that's where it starts. Do you know your love today? You can. He says, beloved, let's love one another. For love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. And anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this, the love of God was manifest among us. God sent his only Son into the world that we might live through him. And this is love, not that we loved God. He loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation, that is the sacrifice for our sin. He disadvantaged himself for our advantage. He said, that your sin, your shame, let me take that. Your debt, let me pay it. Your death, I'll die it. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one's ever seen God, but if we love one another, God's love abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. There's an opportunity to be something so different in the center of Washington, D.C. And it's people who say, I'm building my life on the foundation of the love of God, that he shares his thoughts with me. He gave his life for me. And I'm going to build my life on that. And as I do that, there are going to be people shoulder to shoulder who say, I'm building my life on him too. And the love he fills us with, we share with each other. And that love bears much fruit. And by that, Jesus meant circles of love like that don't stay static. They tend to grow. They tend to expand. They tend to welcome in any who need the love of God that's available in Jesus. Many of you are here because a band of friends decided, we love God, we love each other, let's go love a city together. And you didn't even know. Their expanding circle of love is now right at your doorstep. But what you need first is not them, you need him. And Jesus Christ is standing at your door today saying, I love you. You know me? I sacrificed for you. I want to share my soul with you. And as you come to know me, you're going to be a branch that will bear much fruit. You're going to be perfectly positioned to be a friend of others because you're a friend of God. So let's start there. And then we'll figure out how to love each other well next week. Amen.